Because if they had to deal with some of the red tape that I saw during my 20 years plus in government service, I think we could defeat them handily, quite honestly. I can just hear a meeting now. Well, we've got to have a meeting. We've got to run this through at least 4 line managers and that kind of thing. But I'm very serious about that, and we need to work very hard on that, I think. And I understand what Jerry says because I've never been in a management position. But we've got to do the kind of thing that John and his people have done. You know, we're out there with the Avons and the inflatables with the 200 horsepower motors on it, while the fleet is cruising around with these battleships and cruisers and that kind of thing. And we need to learn how to move more quickly and be more agile and serve the public that we deserve to give their best service.
Well, I think John could probably take that red tape and use it to his advantage somehow. I don't know. Against the bad guys.
Yeah, I was going to tell you another story, but I think I should tell you a joke before I tell you the actual story. So a guy goes to a psychiatrist and said, "Doc, I can't sleep at night. Every time I get in bed, I'm afraid there's monsters under there, and if I try and step out, they're going to grab me and pull me down." So the doctor says, "Well, let me think about this and come back next week, and hopefully I'll have a cure put together for you." So the next week goes by, and he doesn't show up, and the week after that, and about 4 weeks later, the doctor happens to run into this guy at the mall, and he walks up and says, "Hey, I thought you were going to come back for some treatment." And the guy said, "I'm sorry, Doc, I'm cured. I didn't need to come back." And the doctor said, "Well, that's fantastic. How did you get cured?" He said, "Well, my brother-in-law did it." And he says, "Was your brother-in-law a psychiatrist?" And he says, "No, he's a carpenter. He cut the legs off my bed. Now the monsters won't fit underneath it." So along those same lines, we deal with a lot of crazies. I used to have a large feed of email that I used to have to look at every day for threats, because there are some people that would actually threaten the IRS. I know that's hard to believe, but we would get those. But we'd also get people that were saying they were hijacked by aliens and everything else. And I was usually pretty good at being able to spot schizophrenics, the kind of people that are just so friggin' out there that you can look at their letter and know that they just either skipped their medication or they need to double it. And I had one guy one day that was just writing us nonstop. And, the curiosity finally got the best of me. So, using an anonymized phone, because I didn't want him calling me back or anything, If I did, I would have said it was the FBI. But I called him and, I said, "Are you really as crazy as you're writing?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, well, that's good to know." I got like 600 other emails the next 2 weeks following that with the same kind of garbage. And it's interesting because anybody that's ever had to deal with the public, it sucks. Especially if you have to be politically correct, which is kind of against my nature. But there was a...
Really? I would have never known that.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for telling us that, Andy. I didn't know.
Yeah, everybody knows my reputation. Very early on in my career, I remember getting a call from a lady who claimed she was screwed by the IRS. And I kind of reminded her that was the job of the IRS, so what's the problem? And she said, no, you don't understand. I was assaulted by one of your people. So, okay, well, we generally don't do that, so maybe I'll come out there and talk to you. So I got my partner out. This is like 1 o'clock in the morning on like a Thursday night or something. We drive over to this woman's house, and we sit down, and it's an attractive-looking woman. She looks normal. She's a court stenographer. Her house is neat. And nothing that would indicate that, this person is like off the chart, until she started talking. And she started telling me that she was having an affair with an IRS person, and that it got violent, and he did this and that and the other thing, and she can prove it. I go, well, how are you going to do that? She says, well, you see all this stuff in the room? I said, yeah. She says, well, he moved it back to exactly where I left it. I said, well, did you move it where he put it back? He goes, no, that's the beauty of it. It was never moved, but it's back where it belongs. And I'm thinking like, okay, this person needs half her threads restripped. So I said, well, can you tell me more about the assault? She goes, the guy's trying to drive me crazy. He's mentally trying to make me think that I'm nuts. I'm thinking, okay, bitch, this has been a short trip for that drive. So she says, okay, I can finally prove that he's out to try and make me, think I'm crazy, and I'm not. I know I'm not crazy. I said, okay, tell me how you're going to prove it. So she takes me out in the garage, and she says, look, this proves it. I'm looking around thinking okay, this is getting worse. She said, there, and she's pointing the wall, and all I see is a blank wall with a circuit breaker box. I said, lady, it's a circuit breaker box. What about it? She says, open it. So I'm thinking, okay, now she's trying to like set me up and electrocute me. So I get like my pencil and I'm opening this thing up, you know, or thinking like some snake's gonna come flying out at me or something. Open it up and there's switches in there, like kind of what most would expect. She said, that proves it. I said, look, lady, I'm sorry, we're not, you know, communicating here well. What the fuck are you talking about? You know? She says, he rearranged all the circuit breaker boxes so that the colors are different now. So that was my first experience having to deal with people that aren't very normal. Before I had my last boss, I might add. But it's an interesting phenomenon when you actually have to work for an agency that has to be nice to people. And I usually try to be mostly nice, most of the time, sometimes.
Are we going to tell Andy stories
which agency
now?
would that
I'd like
be?
to tell some Andy stories.
Then there's another fun thing I did very early in my career, and I'm saying that's because that magic 7 years of statute of limitations, but we were going to try and prove that we could break into certain high-risk systems in the IRS. My boss decided that we were going to go out to one of these great big server centers and basically jury-rig this box so that we could crack passwords and user accounts and everything else. I figured, cool, fun, whatever. So we end up going to this place that has like no bars. It's like nothing around for like 200 miles. So it's like seriously boring. we decided to go into this place, and I had some software that I wrote that I could basically run on a program that would start capturing keystrokes. No big deal. So we walked in this room, and this room has like 500 computers. There's one guy, like 89 years old, sitting there working. And I walked up to him and said, sir, would you mind if I borrowed your computer for a minute? So the guy looks around and, you know, says, sure, what the hell? He gets up, walks off. So I load this software, and I'm waiting for him to come back, and he like never comes back. So we ended up having to sleep on the floor of this office, waiting for somebody to come back in and log in the machine so I could capture stuff so we could go. Well, as it turns out, it didn't work that day. And we had to set it up a second time, and it didn't work, and a third time. Finally, what happened is I had renamed the program such that when I typed it, I wanted it to look like I mistyped something. And that was really the name of the file. But when I entered the program name, I didn't mistype it. So I had been going in there and entering the same thing wrong like 4 times in a row. So 3 nights we've been sleeping on the floor of this office in this huge service center. And we finally decided that we would just ask the guy to log in the damn system, you know, with the thing running in the foreground. He logged in, we got the password, and then we claimed, you know, success that we were able to compromise an IRS system. So it's sometimes funny how what you do and what comes out in the news is very, very different. The moral of the story of all that was that we ended up going to this one place in town that was a bar. I didn't drink, so I kind of stood outside smoking a cigar. And apparently I stood right next to the main intake vet, and I made the whole place stink like a cigar. And this was like in a very religious area. So they kicked us out. So that was a really lousy trip. Sleep on the floor like 4 nights to capture one password and getting thrown out of a religious community.
So with that said, you know, this is your chance to really ask questions around law enforcement, or why does government do things the way that they do, or, you know, just, you know, really any questions that you might have. There's microphones right up here in the middle. There's also going to be a reception coming up as well. But does anybody have any questions that you want to put forward?
Yeah, it's a free reception.
Any
free
takers?
Food.
Or we'll be forced to tell more stories.
All right. So
you're the only people between us and the beer. Okay.
I don't know when the beer gets here, though.
So I got a question for John, I guess, and I'm kind of interested in, because you're kind of leaning forward, and, you know, if I heard correctly, you were doing forensics out in the field. You know, what were the common? I mean, did they do a good job of protecting their data, or was it just, you know, something you would find if you came across a home user, for instance? Was our adversary were they operationally aware that their machine could be taken advantage of, or forensics done on it?
One of the reasons why the last couple panels I've been leaning so much forward on the tools in the open environment is because most of the stuff that I've seen is traditional open source tools and technologies that have been repackaged and repurposed for nefarious means. I mean, I can buy Linden dollars right now in Second Life. If I choose to launder that money, it's illegal, but the mechanism's still there. I can choose to use a steg tool for fun, or I could use it for malicious purposes. So one of the reasons why we operate the way we do is being able to take tools at that level and use them for alternative use is how you stay ahead of the technological curve. And I think that's a lot of the stuff that that I had come across of, when I was looking at stuff. I wasn't really seeing like, XYZ country with a stamp of approval. I was seeing things that you and I could buy at a hardware store that were kind of soldered together and repackaged. And I really do think that that's the context of the solution for the future. I do see a future that almost resembles a digital OSS. Bill Donovan was effective with this organization in his mere 4 years of existence because of the way they operated. They didn't rely on a mill standard Jeep that came off the assembly line. They took a local vehicle that was indigenous to the environment and repackaged it. So too is that phenomenon possible and done very well on the internet, in the virtual world. So if I could leave you guys with any perspectives, it's if you're in the security protection field, you should be concerned with innocuous looking data. That's the best delivery mechanism. And if you were here for the human intel one before, I went into sort of the dispositions as human beings that we have towards data in general, and keep in mind the vulnerabilities that exist if you have an inherently innocuous looking piece of software. It may not be the case at all. So a lot of the stuff that I came across and Jim and I had these conversations, and have you seen this? No. And have you seen this? No. Oh my God. It was just one of those environments where I hate to keep going back to the analogy of the David and Goliath or the Sun Tzu thing, but if you have zero funding and you're not a military superpower and you're not state sponsored, the only thing at your disposal is open source tools, is commercial stuff. So that's sort of, does that answer your question? Or?
I mean, it was also interesting. I mean, when and again, I'm just making a guess here, but when you're, grabbed a target or we're looking at a target, you find the hardware and stuff laying out. I was just curious, what are the common things that they're using, every day? I mean, are they doing a decent job at protecting the data? I mean, are they using PGP, for instance, or GPG on their laptops, or they just don't care? And
I think it's both. I saw an evolution I did numerous different deployments, and every time I went back, I saw an increased level of complexity. And then as that, Kevin had mentioned before, he said, have you been to CryptoMe site? And I said, yeah, a lot. I think when you look at some of these sites, the same evolution that you see online in the wikis and in the forums is what I saw in the physical sense. The only time I saw a water-cooled CPU, I think, was at an FBI lab, and I thought that was pretty cool. But I never saw that overseas, even though it's hot over there. I realized it was used for gaming, but that was kind of neat, and a Wi-Fi hard drive that was remoted and buried in somebody's backyard. Another kind of neat concept. So, I mean, one of the things, tomorrow's worst adversary is going to be the person who reflects more of a Renaissance man than an eight-dimensional expert. I would be more concerned with somebody that has some comp-sci skills and some special operations skills and a good personality and is cultured than a supercomputer ninja. I really would. And I think that you're seeing that in the complexity of the threats coming in. You're seeing multi-layered approaches, and that's where things are going. So